There are moments in life that split your world in two. Before and after. You don't always see them coming. Sometimes they arrive quietly. Sometimes they come wrapped in an old envelope with your mother's handwriting on the front. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout, it whispers. And that whisper changes everything you thought you knew. My name is Clara, and for 30 years I believed I knew who I was. I believed I knew my family. I believed I knew my mother really, truly knew her, the way only a daughter can know the woman who raised her. But I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it. The day I found out the truth, I wasn't doing anything remarkable. I was sitting on the floor of my mother's bedroom 3 weeks after she passed. I was sorting through her things, her clothes, her shoes, her old reading glasses, the little gold earrings she wore every Sunday to church. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after someone you love has left and is never coming back. I had a cardboard box beside me. I was folding her sweaters, the blue one she always wore in winter, the gray one with the small hole near the sleeve that she refused to throw away. And I was doing okay. I was holding myself together, the way I had been doing since the funeral. But then I opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, the one she always kept locked. Growing up, I had asked about that drawer maybe 100 times. "Mama, what's in there?" And every single time she gave me the same answer. She would smile, a little sadly, and say, "Nothing important, baby, just old papers." Nothing important. Just old papers. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. She was the most honest, most gentle, most loving woman I had ever known. If she said it was nothing, then it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Inside that drawer, underneath a folded scarf and a small Bible, I found a large brown envelope. It was thick and heavy. The edges were worn soft from years of being touched, and on the front, in my mother's careful handwriting, were 2 words. "Forgive me." My hands trembled as I held it. I didn't know why. I didn't know what was inside. But something deep in my chest, something I couldn't name, told me that whatever was in that envelope was going to change my life. And it did. Let me take you back to the beginning. Let me tell you about my mother, so you can understand why this secret hurt so much, and why, in the end, I found a way to forgive her. My mother's name was Ruth Elizabeth Dawson. She was born in 1951 in a small town in North Carolina called Millfield. It was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody, where you couldn't walk to the grocery store without stopping 3 times to talk to a neighbor, where the church was the center of everything and Sunday dinner was sacred. Mama grew up poor, not the kind of poor where you complain about it, the kind of poor where you just don't talk about it. You make do, you stretch what you have. You eat beans and cornbread 4 nights a week and you say thank you to God for every bite. Her father, my grandfather, worked at a lumber mill. Her mother's, my grandmother, who we called Big Mama, cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the other side of town. They were good people, hard-working people, but life was never easy for them. Mama was the second of 5 children. She had an older brother, James, and 3 younger sisters, Della, Pearl, and Willa. They all grew up in a small wooden house with a tin roof that leaked when it rained. Mama told me once that on rainy nights, they would put pots and pans on the floor to catch the water, and the sound of the dripping would lull them all to sleep. She said it like it was a happy memory. That was the thing about Mama. She could find something beautiful in almost anything. When Mama was 19, she met my father. His name was Walter James Price. He was 22, tall, quiet, and worked at the post office in the next town over. Mama said the first time she saw him, he was standing outside the church, holding his hat in his hands, looking like he didn't know where to go. She walked up to him and said, "You look lost." And he looked at her and said, "I think I just got found." That was it. That was their love story. Simple, honest. No fireworks, no grand gestures. Just 2 young people who saw something in each other that made the world feel a little less hard. They got married 6 months later. A small ceremony at the church. Big Mama made the cake. Mama wore a white dress that Della had sewn by hand, and for a little while everything was good. They moved into a rented house on Elm Street. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room, but Mama made it feel like a palace. She hung curtains she made from old fabric. She planted flowers by the front steps. She kept the floors so clean you could eat off them. Daddy worked long hours at the post office and picked up extra shifts at the hardware store on weekends. Mama worked part-time at the school cafeteria. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And then, in the spring of 1972, Mama found out she was pregnant. She was 20 years old. She told me this part of the story many times over the years, how she sat on the edge of the bathtub with the test in her hand, crying, not because she was sad, but because she was so happy she didn't know what to do with the feeling. She said it was like her heart was too full, like it might burst right open. Daddy came home that night and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a big smile on her face. He said, "What happened?" And she just pointed at her belly. He sat down, he put his head in his hands, and then he looked up and he was crying too. They were going to be parents. The months that followed were filled with planning and dreaming. Mama knitted blankets. Daddy painted the spare bedroom yellow because they didn't know if it would be a boy or a girl. Big Mama started sewing baby clothes. Aunt Della brought over a second-hand crib she found at a yard sale. Everyone was excited. The whole family was waiting. And on a cold December night in 1972, Mama went into labor. Daddy drove her to the hospital in their old Ford truck. It was snowing, the first snow of the season. Mama said the roads were slippery, and Daddy was gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. They made it to the hospital, and a few hours later I was born. Clara Ruth Price, 7 pounds 2 ounces, healthy, screaming, alive. Mama held me and said I was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She counted my fingers. She counted my toes. She kissed my forehead and whispered, "I've been waiting for you my whole life." And that was the story I grew up hearing. That was the story I believed. But it wasn't the whole story. There was a part she left out, a part she never told me, a part she carried with her, silently, for 30 years. And I had no idea. Growing up, I had a good childhood. Not perfect, but good. Mama was warm and present. She braided my hair every morning before school. She packed my lunch with little notes that said things like, "You are my sunshine," or "I believe in you." She helped me with my homework at the kitchen table every evening, even when she was tired from working all day. Daddy was quieter. He showed his love differently through actions, not words. He fixed things. He built things. When my bicycle chain broke, he stayed up late to repair it so I could ride it to school the next morning. When I wanted a bookshelf for my room, he built one from scrap wood and sanded it smooth with his own hands. They were good parents, both of them. I never doubted that they loved me. But there were things I noticed as I got older. Small things. Things that didn't make sense at the time, but that I filed away in the back of my mind without really thinking about them. The first thing was the sadness. Mama had a sadness in her that she tried very hard to hide. Most of the time, she did a good job. She smiled. She laughed. She sang hymns while she cooked dinner. But sometimes, when she thought nobody was watching, the sadness would come through. I first noticed it when I was about 8 years old. It was a December evening, close to my birthday. Mama was standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the snow. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, still and quiet. I walked up behind her and tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, what are you looking at?" She turned to me, and for just a second, just a flash, I saw something in her eyes that frightened me. It was a deep, faraway pain, like she was looking at something I couldn't see, something that hurt her very much. But then she smiled and said, "Nothing, baby, just watching the snow." She picked me up and carried me to the living room, and we sat together on the couch, and she read me a story. And I forgot about it. But it happened again, and again. Every year around the same time, my birthday, Mama would get quiet. She would withdraw into herself. She would go to her room and close the door, and when she came out, her eyes would be red, like she had been crying. I asked Daddy about it once when I was 12. "Why does Mama get sad around my birthday?" He looked at me for a long time, and then he said, "Your Mama has a lot of love in her heart, Clara. Sometimes when you love someone that much, it hurts." I didn't understand what he meant, but I accepted it, the way children accept the things adults tell them. The second thing I noticed was the drawer. That bottom drawer in Mama's dresser, the locked one. I was curious about it the way all children are curious about locked things. What was in there? Why couldn't I see it? When I was 14, I tried to open it. Mama was at work and Daddy was at the store. I found a butter knife and tried to pry it open, but I couldn't. The lock held firm. When Mama came home, I didn't tell her what I had done. But I think she knew somehow, because that evening she sat me down and said, very gently, "Clara, there are some things that belong to me and only me. That drawer is one of them. I need you to respect that." "But what's in there, Mama?" "Old papers, old memories, nothing that would mean anything to you." "Then why do you keep it locked?" She looked at me, and again I saw that flicker of pain in her eyes. "Because some memories are too heavy to share," she said quietly, "even with the people you love most." I didn't push it. I never brought it up again. But I never forgot. The third thing I noticed was the way Mama acted around Bobbies. She loved Bobbies. She adored them. Whenever someone in the neighborhood had a new baby, Mama was the first one there with a casserole and a knitted blanket. She would hold the baby and rock it and sing to it, and her face would glow with a tenderness that was almost sacred. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, when she handed the baby back, I would see her face change. The glow would dim, and that deep, quiet sadness would settle over her like a shadow. I remember one time, I was about 16, we were at church, and a woman named Sister Pauline had just had a baby boy. Mama held him for a long time, longer than was polite, really. And when Sister Pauline reached out to take him back, Mama held on for just an extra second, just 1 second longer than she should have. And when she let go, she turned away, and I saw a tear slide down her cheek. "Mama, are you okay?" I whispered. "I'm fine, baby," she said, wiping her face. "He's just so beautiful, that's all." But it wasn't all. I knew it wasn't all. Even then, at 16, I knew there was something she wasn't telling me. I just didn't know what. Years passed. I grew up. I graduated from high school. I went to community college. I got a job as a receptionist at a doctor's office. I met a man named David, kind, steady, patient David, and we got married when I was 25. Through all of it, Mama was there. She was at every graduation, every milestone, every important moment. She helped me plan my wedding. She held my hand when I was nervous walking down the aisle. She cried when David and I said our vows. And when I had my first child, a son, Marcus, she came to the hospital and held him and said the same thing she had said about me. "He is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Life was good, busy, full, imperfect, but good. Mama and Daddy moved into a smaller house after Daddy retired. They came over for Sunday dinners. Mama spoiled Marcus with cookies and stories and too many toys. Everything felt settled. Everything felt complete. And then Daddy got sick. It started slowly. A cough that wouldn't go away, tiredness that didn't make sense. He went to the doctor and they ran tests, and 3 weeks later we got the word that nobody wants to hear. Cancer, lung cancer, stage 3. Daddy fought it for 2 years. He did the treatments. He lost his hair. He lost his weight. He lost the strength in his hands that had built my bookshelf and fixed my bicycle. But he never lost his quiet dignity. He never complained. He never felt sorry for himself. He passed on a Sunday morning in March. He was 71 years old. At the funeral, Mama stood very straight and very still. She didn't cry, not in front of people. She greeted every person who came. She thanked them for the flowers and the food. She held my hand and David's hand and Marcus's hand, and she was the strongest person in the room. But later that night, when everyone had gone home, I found her sitting in the dark in her living room, holding one of Daddy's old shirts, pressing it to her face. "Mama," I said, sitting down beside her. "He was a good man, Clara," she whispered. "A good, good man, and he helped me carry something that was so heavy, and now I have to carry it alone." "Carry what, Mama?" I asked. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she was going to tell me. I could see it in her eyes, the words forming, the truth rising to the surface. Her lips parted. She took a breath. But then she shook her head. "Nothing, baby. I'm just tired. Go on home. I'll be all right." I should have pushed. I should have asked again. But I didn't. I kissed her forehead and went home. That was a mistake I would think about for a long time. After Daddy died, Mama changed. Not in big ways, but in small, quiet ways. She stopped going to church as regularly. She stopped planting flowers in the front yard. She would sit in her chair by the window for hours, looking out but not really seeing anything. I visited her as often as I could, 3, 4 times a week. I brought her food. I cleaned her house. I sat with her and tried to make her talk. But she was drifting. I could feel it. She was pulling away from the world slowly, like a boat untied from its dock, floating out into still, quiet water. The doctors said it was grief. They said it was depression. They gave her medication and told me to keep her company and be patient. I tried. I really tried. But 5 years after Daddy passed, Mama started having trouble with her memory. She would forget where she put her keys. She would call me by her sister Della's name. She would start a sentence and trail off, staring into space. The diagnosis came on a rainy Wednesday. Alzheimer's, early stage but progressing. I sat in the doctor's office and felt the floor drop out from under me. My mother, my beautiful, wise, gentle mother, was losing her mind. The woman who had braided my hair and packed my lunches and sung me to sleep was disappearing, one memory at a time. I moved her into our house. David and I set up the spare bedroom for her. Marcus, who was 9 by then, was thrilled. "Grandma's living with us," he shouted, jumping on the couch. And for a while it was okay. Mama had good days and bad days. On good days, she was almost herself, telling stories, laughing, helping me cook dinner. On bad days, she would get confused and scared and call out for Daddy, forgetting that he was gone. Those bad days were the hardest. But there was one night, one particular night, that I will never forget. It was about 2 in the morning. I woke up because I heard Mama's voice. She was talking, not loudly, but clearly, in the room next door. I got up and went to check on her. She was sitting up in bed, looking at the wall, talking to someone who wasn't there. "I'm sorry," she was saying. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. You have to believe me. I didn't want to let you go." "Mama," I said, stepping into the room. She turned to me, and her eyes were wide and clear, clearer than they had been in weeks. And she said, "They took him, Clara. They took him and I couldn't stop them." My heart started beating fast. "Took who, Mama? Who are you talking about?" But the clarity was already fading. Her eyes clouded over. She blinked, confused, and looked around the room like she didn't know where she was. "Mama, who did they take?" She lay back down and pulled the covers up to her chin. "I'm tired," she murmured. "So tired." And then she was asleep. I stood there in the doorway for a long time, my heart pounding, my mind racing. Who was she talking about? Who did they take? What did she mean? I told myself it was the disease. It was the Alzheimer's, mixing up memories, creating confusion. It didn't mean anything. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Mama passed away on a quiet evening in October. She was 79 years old. The last few months had been difficult. She barely recognized me anymore. She would look at me with kind but empty eyes and say, "Are you the nurse?" And I would say, "No, Mama, I'm Clara. I'm your daughter." And sometimes she would nod, and sometimes she would just stare. On her last day, though, something happened. Something I still think about. I was sitting beside her bed, holding her hand. Marcus was at school. David was at work. It was just the two of us. The room was filled with soft afternoon light, and the house was completely silent. Her breathing had been slow all day. The hospice nurse had told me it wouldn't be long. I was stroking her hand, talking to her softly, telling her it was okay, telling her she could rest, telling her Daddy was waiting for her. And then her eyes opened. They were clear, perfectly, startlingly clear, like the fog had lifted for one final moment. She looked at me and she said, "Clara." I leaned forward. "I'm here, Mama." "The drawer," she whispered. "Open the drawer, the key is in my Bible." "What drawer, Mama?" But she just squeezed my hand, one gentle, deliberate squeeze, and then her eyes closed. Her breathing slowed, and a few minutes later she was gone. I held her hand for a long time after she stopped breathing. I didn't cry, not then. The tears would come later, waves and waves of them, but in that moment I just sat there and held her hand and tried to memorize the feeling of it, the weight of it, the warmth that was slowly, slowly fading. The funeral was small and beautiful. Our pastor, Reverend Thompson, spoke about Mama's kindness, her faith, her quiet strength. Aunt Della and Aunt Pearl came. Aunt Willa, who lived in Georgia, called and cried on the phone. Uncle James, who was 82 and in poor health, sent flowers. People from church brought food. Neighbors stopped by. Everyone said the same things. She was a good woman. She's with the Lord now. She's at peace. And she was at peace. I believed that, but I was not. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. Her last words. The drawer, open the drawer, the key is in my Bible. After the funeral, I waited. I told myself there was no rush. I told myself I would deal with Mama's things when I was ready. But 3 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I found myself in her bedroom. David was at work. Marcus was at school. I was alone. I went to the dresser. I looked at the bottom drawer, the one that had been locked my entire life. Then I went to the nightstand and picked up Mama's Bible, the old, worn, leather-bound Bible that she had read every single day for as long as I could remember. I opened it, and there, tucked into the pages of the book of Isaiah, was a small brass key. My hands were shaking. I knelt down in front of the dresser. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. The drawer opened. Inside, there was a folded scarf, pale blue, soft, old. Underneath the scarf was the brown envelope, the one with "Forgive me" written on the front. I sat on the floor. I held the envelope in my lap. I took a deep breath, and then I opened it. Inside the envelope, there were several things. The first was a photograph, black and white, small, with scalloped edges. It showed 2 Bobbies lying side by side on a hospital blanket, 2 tiny, identical Bobbies. Twins. I stared at the photograph. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in Mama's handwriting, it said, Clara and Samuel, December 14, 1972. Clara and Samuel. Clara, that was me. Samuel, who was Samuel. I set the photograph down and reached back into the envelope. There was a birth certificate, an official birth certificate from the county hospital. It listed 2 births on December 14, 1972, to Ruth and Walter Price. Baby A, Clara Ruth Price, female, 7 pounds 2 oz. Baby B, Samuel Walter Price, male, 6 pounds 9 oz. I had a brother. I had a twin brother. I had a twin brother, and I had never known. The room tilted. I put my hand on the floor to steady myself. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. There was more in the envelope. A letter several pages long, written in Mama's handwriting. The ink was faded in places, and there were spots where it had been smudged, as if water or tears had fallen on the paper. I picked up the letter and began to read. The letter was addressed to me. My dearest Clara, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the thing I feared most has come true. I have left this world without having the courage to tell you the truth to your face. I am so sorry. I am so deeply, deeply sorry. You have a brother. His name is Samuel. He is your twin. He was born 4 minutes after you on the same cold December night in the same hospital room. He was small and perfect and beautiful just like you. I held you both, one in each arm, and for a few hours I was the happiest woman in the world. But then the doctor came and talked to your father and me. He said that Samuel was born with a heart condition. It wasn't life-threatening, he said, but it would need treatment, surgeries, ongoing care, things that would cost money, a lot of money. Your father and I had nothing, Clara. You know that. We could barely afford the rent. We could barely keep food on the table. The idea of paying for surgeries and specialists and hospital stays, it was impossible. It was beyond anything we could imagine. The doctor told us about a couple from up north from Connecticut. They were wealthy. They couldn't have children of their own. They had been looking to adopt. And they had the means to give Samuel everything he needed, the medical care, the stability, the opportunities that we could not provide. Your father said no. He said it immediately without hesitating. We keep our children, he said. Both of them will find a way. But I knew we wouldn't find a way. I knew the truth that your father didn't want to face. If we kept Samuel, we couldn't afford his care. And without the care, the doctors said his heart could fail. He might not survive past childhood. I had a choice, Clara. Keep my son and watch him suffer, maybe watch him die, or let him go and know that he would be safe, that he would live, that he would have a chance. It was the hardest decision of my life. It was the decision that broke me. I chose to let him go. I had to stop reading. I put the letter down and pressed my hands to my face and cried. Not softly, not quietly. I cried the way you cry when the ground opens up beneath you and you realize that everything you stood on was not solid. It was not real. The foundation of your life, the simple, clear, honest story of your birth, your family, your identity, had a crack in it. A crack that had been there all along, hidden, papered over, kept in a locked drawer. I had a brother, a twin brother, and my mother had given him away. My mother, the woman who braided my hair, who sang to me, who told me I was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She had looked at her own son, her baby boy, and she had let someone else take him. She had signed papers. She had handed him over. And then she had come home and raised me, alone, as if he had never existed. How could she do that? How could she look at me every day and not tell me? How could she celebrate my birthday every year, knowing that somewhere out there, her other child was turning the same age, and she wasn't there to see it? The sadness, the tears in December, the way she held other people's bobbies, the locked drawer, the words she spoke in the darkness of her Alzheimer's confusion. They took him, and I couldn't stop them. It all made sense now. Every single piece of the puzzle clicked into place. And it broke my heart. After a long time, I picked up the letter again. I needed to finish it. The couple came to the hospital 2 days after you were born, Mama wrote. Their names were Margaret and Robert Ashford. They were kind people, Clara. I could see it in their eyes. Margaret held Samuel so gently, like he was made of glass, and Robert stood beside her with tears on his face. They promised me they would love him. They promised me they would take care of him. They promised me he would never want for anything. I signed the papers on a Thursday morning. Your father was there. He signed too, but he wouldn't look at me. He held my hand, but he wouldn't look at me. And when they took Samuel out of the room, I heard the sound that still haunts me, the soft click of the door closing behind them. I never heard my son cry as they carried him away. He was sleeping. He was peaceful. He didn't know he was leaving his mother. But I knew, and something inside me died that day, Clara, something that never came back. Your father and I made a pact. We agreed that we would never speak of it, not to each other, not to anyone. We would raise you with all the love we had, and we had so much love, Clara, so much, and we would never let you see the wound. But wounds don't disappear just because you hide them. They stay, they fester, they ache. Every December when your birthday came, I would hold you and celebrate and smile, and then at night when you were asleep, I would go to my room and cry for the child I gave away. I would wonder where he was, if he was happy, if he was healthy, if his heart was strong. I kept the photograph. I kept his birth certificate. I kept these things in the drawer because I couldn't bear to throw them away. He was my son. He existed. Even if the world didn't know it, I needed to know it. I needed proof that he was real. I thought about finding him so many times, Clara. So many times I almost picked up the phone, almost wrote a letter, almost drove to Connecticut. But I was afraid of what I would find, afraid that he would hate me, afraid that opening that door would destroy the fragile peace I had built. And so I kept the secret, year after year, decade after decade, until the secret became a part of me, as permanent as my bones. I am telling you now because I cannot carry it anymore, and because you deserve to know. You had a brother, Clara. You have a brother. And wherever he is, I pray that he has had a good life, that the Ashfords loved him the way I would have loved him, that his heart is strong and his days are full. Find him, Clara, if you can. Find him and tell him that his mother loved him, that not a day went by, not one single day in 30 years when I didn't think about him, when I didn't love him, when I didn't wish I could hold him one more time. And forgive me, please, baby, forgive me. The letter ended there. I sat on the floor of my mother's bedroom, and I held that letter against my chest, and I rocked back and forth like a child. And I said, out loud to the empty room, I forgive you, Mama, I forgive you. I didn't tell David right away. I needed time to sit with it, to absorb it, to feel everything I needed to feel before I could form the words to explain it to someone else. For 3 days, I walked around in a daze. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I helped Marcus with his homework. But my mind was somewhere else. My mind was 30 years in the past, in a hospital room, watching my mother hold 2 bobbies and knowing that she was about to lose one of them. On the 4th night, after Marcus was in bed, I sat David down at the kitchen table and told him everything. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He just listened the way David always listened, with his whole self, with patience and kindness. When I finished, He was quiet for a long time. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to find him," I said. "I want to find Samuel." He nodded. "Then we'll find him." Finding Samuel was not easy. The adoption had been private, arranged through the hospital and a local attorney who had died years ago. There were no agency records, no centralized files. The trail was cold, decades old, and covered over by time. But I had a name, Ashford. Margaret and Robert Ashford from Connecticut. It was a starting point. David helped me search. We spent evenings at the computer, looking through public records, old phone directories, obituaries. We hired a woman named Janet who specialized in finding people from closed adoptions. She was kind and experienced and told me not to get my hopes up. "These things can take months," she said. "Sometimes years, sometimes you never find them." "I'll wait," I told her, "however long it takes." It took 4 months. Janet called me on a Wednesday morning. I was at work, filing papers at the doctor's office, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't answer. "Clara," she said, "I found him." I had to sit down. My legs went weak. I grabbed the edge of the desk and lowered myself into a chair. "His name is Samuel Ashford," Janet said. "He's 42 years old. He lives in Hartford, Connecticut. He's a high school history teacher. He's married. He has 2 daughters. A teacher. He was a teacher. He was alive. He was married. He had children." My brother was alive. "What about his heart?" I asked, because that was the thing I needed to know most. "The heart condition, is he okay?" "He had surgery when he was 3 years old," Janet said. "A successful surgery. He's been healthy ever since." I put my hand over my mouth and closed my eyes. The surgery had worked. The Ashfords had gotten him the care he needed. Mama's sacrifice, her terrible, impossible, heartbreaking sacrifice, had saved his life. "Clara," Janet said, "are you still there?" "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm here." The next step was the hardest. Contacting him, telling him who I was, telling him the truth about where he came from. Janet helped me write a letter. We spent a week on it, choosing every word carefully. It had to be gentle. It had to be honest. It couldn't be too much all at once. "Dear Samuel," the letter began. "My name is Clara Price. I was born on December 14, 1972 in Millfield, North Carolina. I believe I am your twin sister." I included the photograph, a copy of it, not the original, the 2 Bobbies side by side, and I included my phone number and my email address. "I don't want to disrupt your life," I wrote. "I only want you to know that you have a family who has thought about you every single day, and a mother who loved you more than you could ever know." I mailed the letter on a Friday, and then I waited. The waiting was agony. Every day I checked my phone 100 times. Every time it rang, my heart jumped. Every time I opened my email, my hands trembled. 1 week passed, then 2, then 3. I started to think he wouldn't respond. Maybe the letter had frightened him. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe his life with the Ashfords was complete and whole, and he didn't need a sister from North Carolina showing up out of nowhere. I tried to accept that. I tried to tell myself that it was enough to know he was alive and well, that I didn't need more. But I did need more. I needed to see his face. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to look at him and see the brother I should have grown up with. And then, on a Sunday evening, 26 days after I mailed the letter, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes. The caller ID showed a Connecticut area code. My hands went still in the soapy water. I dried them on a towel. I picked up the phone. "Hello," I said. There was a pause, a long, quiet pause. And then a voice, a man's voice, warm and uncertain and just slightly unsteady, said, "Is this Clara?" "Yes," I said, "this is Clara." Another pause. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background and a child's laughter and all the ordinary sounds of a life being lived. "This is Samuel," he said. "I got your letter." I leaned against the kitchen counter. My legs were shaking. David walked in, saw my face, and stopped. "Thank you for calling," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you so much." "I've always known I was adopted," he said. "My parents, the Ashfords, they told me when I was 12. They were wonderful people, Clara. They gave me a beautiful life. But I always wondered. I always wondered where I came from, who I looked like, whether I had siblings. You do, I said. You have me. And then, for the first time in 30 years, I heard my brother cry. We talked for 2 hours that first night. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his life, growing up in Hartford, his adoptive parents, his wife Emily, his daughters Grace and Sophie. He told me about the heart surgery he'd had as a toddler, how the Ashfords had taken him to the best doctors, how he'd been healthy ever since. I told him about Millfield, about Mama and Daddy, about the small house on Elm Street and the church and Big Mama's cooking, about David and Marcus, about the locked drawer and the envelope and the letter. When I told him what Mama had written, that she loved him, that she thought about him every day, that letting him go was the hardest thing she ever did, he went quiet for a long time. She gave me up so I could live, he said finally. Yes, I said, that's exactly what she did. That's not giving up, he said, his voice thick with emotion. That's the most selfless kind of love there is. I closed my eyes and felt something loosen in my chest, a knot that had been there since I opened that envelope. A knot of anger and confusion and grief. It didn't disappear entirely, but it loosened. It eased. Because he was right. Mama hadn't given Samuel away because she didn't want him. She had given him away because she loved him so much that she was willing to break her own heart to save his life. That wasn't weakness. That wasn't betrayal. That was love. The purest, most painful kind of love there is. We met in person 6 weeks later. I flew to Hartford. David came with me. Marcus stayed with Aunt Della. Samuel met us at a restaurant near his house. I saw him through the window before we went inside, and I stopped on the sidewalk, unable to move. He looked like Daddy. The same tall, quiet frame, the same gentle eyes, the same way of standing, a little still, a little watchful, like he was taking everything in before deciding what to do. But he also looked like Mama, the shape of his face, the curve of his smile, the way he tilted his head when he was listening. He looked like home. When I walked through the door, he stood up. We looked at each other for a long moment. 30 years of separation, of silence, of not knowing, it all hung in the air between us like a held breath. And then he opened his arms. I walked into them and he held me, and I held him, and we stood there in the middle of that restaurant, 2 strangers who shared the same blood, the same birthday, the same mother, crying in each other's arms. "Hi, sister," he whispered. "Hi, brother," I said. And just like that, the missing piece clicked into place. We spent 3 days together. We sat in his living room and looked at old photographs, his from Hartford, mine from Millfield. We marveled at the similarities. We both loved reading. We both were terrible cooks. We both had a habit of tapping our fingers on the table when we were thinking, something Mama used to do. I met Emily, his wife. She was lovely, quiet, and warm, and clearly deeply in love with Samuel. I met Grace and Sophie, his daughters 8 and 6, full of energy and laughter. They called me Aunt Clara, and it felt so natural, so right, that it made me want to cry every time they said it. On the second evening, Samuel and I sat alone on his back porch. The girls were in bed. Emily and David were inside, talking. We sat in the quiet for a while, looking at the stars. "I wish she could have met me," Samuel said softly. "Our mother, I wish I could have told her that I understand, that I don't blame her, that I'm grateful." "She knew," I said. "Somewhere, somehow she knew." "Do you think she's at peace now?" he asked. I thought about Mama's face in those last moments, the clarity in her eyes, the gentle squeeze of her hand, the way she told me to open the drawer. She had waited until the very end to let go of the secret, and I believed that in letting it go, she had finally found the peace that had eluded her for 30 years. "Yes," I said, "I think she's finally at peace." Samuel reached over and took my hand. We sat like that for a long time, brother and sister, side by side under the stars, connected by blood and loss and love. And for the first time since I opened that drawer, I felt whole. It has been 4 years since I found that envelope. 4 years since my world split open and reformed itself into something different, something larger, something more complete. Samuel and his family come to Millfield every summer now. He sits on the porch of the house where Mama grew up and listens to Aunt Della tell stories about the old days. He goes to the church where Mama and Daddy got married. He stands at their graves and talks to them. Quietly, privately, the way you talk to people who can't answer but who you know are listening. Marcus adores his uncle. Grace and Sophie adore their cousin. David and Emily have become close friends. Our families are woven together now, the threads that were separated so long ago finally brought back into the same fabric. I still think about Mama's secret. I still feel the weight of it sometimes, the sadness, the what-ifs, the lost years. There are moments when I wish she had told me sooner. Moments when I wish she had trusted me with the truth. Moments when I feel a flash of something that might be anger, though it fades quickly into understanding. Because the older I get, the more I understand what she must have gone through. The more I understand the impossible choice she faced. She was 20 years old, poor, scared, holding a sick baby and a healthy baby, and someone was telling her that the only way to save one was to let him go. What would I have done? I don't know. I honestly don't know. And that's the thing about judging someone else's choices. You can never fully understand them until you've stood exactly where they stood, felt exactly what they felt, feared exactly what they feared. Mama wasn't perfect. She made mistakes. Keeping the secret for so long, that was a mistake. It robbed me of years with my brother. It robbed Samuel of knowing where he came from. It robbed us all of time that we can never get back. But the decision itself, the decision to let him go so he could live, that was not a mistake. That was a mother's love at its most fierce and sacrificial. That was a woman choosing her child's life over her own heart. And I will never, ever judge her for that. There is a verse in Mama's Bible that she had underlined. I found it after she passed, in the book of Isaiah, the same pages where she had hidden the key. It says, "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you." She never forgot him. Not for one day, not for 1 hour. The sadness I saw in her every December, the tears she shed when she held other people's bobbies, the words she whispered in the confusion of her final years. They took him. They took him and I couldn't stop them. It was all proof that Samuel lived in her heart every single moment of every single day. He was never lost to her. He was never forgotten. He was carried silently, secretly, painfully in the deepest part of her soul. And now he is carried in mine. If you're listening to this and you're holding a secret, a heavy one, the kind that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe, I want you to know something. The truth doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it heals. Sometimes it brings people together who were meant to be together. Sometimes the thing you're most afraid to say is the thing that will finally set you free. My mother kept her secret for 30 years. It protected her in a way, but it also imprisoned her. It kept her in a cage of guilt and grief that she never fully escaped. Don't wait 30 years. Don't wait until it's too late. If there's someone who deserves to know the truth, tell them. Find the words. Find the courage. Open the drawer. Because on the other side of that fear, on the other side of that locked door, there might be a brother you never knew. A hand reaching for yours. A voice saying, "Hi, sister." And a love that was never really lost, just waiting to be found.